So I'm talking strictly about armor here. So, helmet, shoulders, legs, all of those very visible pieces. We still want jewelry, cloaks, trinkets, and weapons to be more role-focused. If you talk to healers, many of them will tell you that spirit is actually a pretty interesting stat, and you can decide how much spirit you want on your gear in a way that, say, the mage can't decide how much hit they want on their gear. So jewelry, cloak, trinkets, weapons can still be more role-focused. You might have items with spirit, in which case the healer would be interested. You might have an item without spirit, in which case other people might be interested, or the healer might be as well. Some of these will be less, spec agnostic, so they'll be more spec agnostic. So they may just have attack power, spell power, rather than being like the agility spirit item. And then to replace the loss of dodge and parry, we think we're back at a place where we can just put armor as a good tanking stat. Active mitigation has worked out really well, and we think there's room just to have armor. It won't be the stat on every piece because it's not going to be on all of your actual armor, but it can be on things like the rings and cloaks. Tertiary stats. So it might seem like we're really streamlining gear here, but what we're really trying to do is give it a long tail. It's not fun when you go for a long time and don't get your weapon and feel like you're just really far behind everyone else. But at the same time, we don't want you to gear up, in 2 weeks and be done, and then say, like, dude, when's the next raid coming out? So we're kind of expanding the idea of warforging. I mentioned we're doing it with gems. We're also adding these bonus tertiary stats. So you may get a glove one day that has an extra stat on it that does something cool. These don't count against the budget. It's just a bonus when it happens. And here's some examples of tertiary stats we're playing with. I'm not going to read all these. You guys can see the slides. Now, again, it's really unlikely, unless you're very dedicated or very lucky, that you're going to have your sturdiness set, because there's just not going to be that many pieces out there. You're not going to be able to stack sturdiness, and guess what? You can't reforge it. We added a little bit about will stack down there because we realize our movement bonuses are kind of difficult to understand about what works with what. So we rebuilt the system to where pretty much any movement speed you get will work with any other movement speed up to some, sane level druids. Cleave's been an interesting stat. We played with it a little bit on the trinkets in the latest raid tier. And we don't think it's necessarily fun to be like, I'm going to put on my cleave set, I'm going to take off my cleave set. But if you get it as a bonus on some of your items, hey, that could be pretty cool. You'll do a little bit of extra AE cleaving sometimes. Item squish. We tried it before. We're trying it again. Why? I'm a pretty simple guy at the end of the day, and I have trouble understanding when I see that many zeros on the screen. Make whatever jokes you want. Most of our item inflation comes from previous raid tiers, but it's much less important that Blackwing Lair gear is a massive upgrade over Molten Core gear. Yeah, people are still running that old content, and we're cool with that, but it's not that big a deal that the Blackwing Lair gear is much higher item level anymore. So we're just going to flatten out all of the big jumps that come at the previous raid tiers at these levels. This is current insanity. And these are some slightly more sane numbers. Okay, a bunch of caveats here. I hear people cheering, but I know there's people out there grumbling too, dumbing the game down. Your relative power will not change. If you look at percentages, if you are a healer and you know how much your flash heal heals on your tank, the bar will still jump by the same amount. The relative power of 5.4 gear will not change. So if you're currently a heroic raider, your gear will be just as powerful as it is today relative to all the other gear, and that'll still translate into going into 6.0. If it takes you 5 seconds to kill a Timeless Isle Gulp Frog, it will still take you 5 seconds to kill a Timeless Isle Gulp Frog. And I should probably say this one 4 or 5 times, but if you like to solo old content, you can still solo old content. We'll make sure that happens. We knew a lot of people were trying to get their Ashes of Alar, trying to get their hammer from Ragnaros, but it turns out a lot of people do this all the time, and it brings a lot of extra value to the game for players who want to keep supporting it. And if you've played on the floor, the item squish is already in, and if you didn't even notice it was in, then awesome. That wraps up our presentation. Looks like